Welcome back to the Powerful Communication Podcast. This is Colin Kelly, and thank you so much for listening. And those of you that share this podcast as well and listen regularly, it's great to know that you're there. This is a place where I can explore, I guess, sometimes some weird ideas of mine in a safe space. It's much better than saying this stuff on Twitter or Instagram where people can comment underneath or they can take things and twist it and use it out of context. The podcast is a kind of safe place for me to do some of this. I've always been really interested in Charles Dickens. I love the books, I love the stories. I studied it when I was in kind of final years of secondary school. The fact that he was a journalist always very much appealed to me as well. And his sort of conflicting ideas. So one thing about Charles Dickens, or at least my understanding of him, that he didn't like the state, he didn't like the government. He didn't like the establishment. He would have a right go at them, but neither was he a radical that wanted to bring it all down. He thought he could make it better, or maybe more accurately, he thought that we could make it better, or that they could make themselves better. And that's always something that has, I suppose, struck a chord with me, and I hope maybe found its way into my life and our business as well, in the way that we do things. So, there's these people that would tear it all apart, and we don't subscribe to that, but neither do we want to become the greedy elite either. And one of the ideas, I suppose, that Charles Dickens had was this idea that commerce could be a force for good if it was guided by a moral compass. Okay, so if you've got good people doing good things, business can very much be part of that as well. So this idea, I suppose, of the enterprise as a force for good in our society, rather than it being entirely selfish and only concerned with profit and using people, in that way. And I think when we look around society today, we see a lot of businesses actually taking that on. And there's been lots of research done recently that actually a lot of people expect businesses, so private sector profit-making businesses, they expect them to do something for the common good, or for, I suppose, positive societal change. You can even see that this is something that the Scottish government are quite big on. Lots of governments are quite big on it, where now even through public sector procurement, where you're being asked, well, where's your community benefits? Where's your added value? And I'm sure that there's some of that is a bit of a box tick. There's some of it probably a bit of a waste of time, maybe a bit cynical. But there's also some of it is actually really good. And there's an argument, of course, that, well, you're getting the private sector to do things that the state should be doing anyway. But the other way of looking at it is, well, if it's public money that's being spent on this, then, well, why isn't there that community aspect of it? All of that is to say, another thing I'm quite interested in these days, and I'm starting to see this starting to happen, is private sector businesses moving into commercial radio. I've seen two powerful examples of this recently, one in Ayrshire, another one in Edinburgh. I think we're going to see more of it as well. And I think if it was 20, 30 years ago, there might be a bit of, well, these people just, it's vanity. They like playing music, or they like this idea of having a platform to broadcast, or they like the thought that they might be rubbing shoulders with celebrities. The people I'm talking about, they're doing it out of a genuine affection for their communities. And what they're seeing is these communities maybe being a little fractured, which I think is part and parcel of post-COVID. I think it's just where we are economically just now. I think it's where we are politically. I think it's fair to say that there's a bit of a fracturing in many of our local communities. And I think they're also seeing a business opportunity, which is that the incumbent local radio station, which has probably been there maybe since the 70s or maybe 80s, in some cases maybe not until the 90s, but for more than 30 years, these incumbent local radio stations, these businesses, basically upping sticks and leaving. And I think what we're seeing is private individuals maybe who advertised on radio or who enjoyed listening to it, thinking, oh, okay, well, we'll go in and do that. And part of it, I think, is because they value that community and they want to give something back. They want to try and bring it together again. But I think they also see a business case that, well, there must be, you're not telling me that Edinburgh can't support its own 24-hour radio station, and if Ayrshire could do it back in the late 90s, well, why can't it do it now? Especially with increased and improved technology. Well, let's try it. And with DAB, they have the ability to do that. You don't need to go through the old-fashioned beauty parade that the regulator used to do, where they'd advertise a license and you'd all bid for it and the best bidder won. They don't do that anymore. If you can jump through a couple of hoops and pay a bit of money and get the requisite license and have your house in order, then there's lots of opportunities now for almost anyone to put together a case to run a radio station on DAB or DAB+. There's a community aspect to it, but there's also a private enterprise profit-making element, which is more expensive, where you could put your radio station on the DAB multiplexes. And as I say, I've mentioned a couple of examples, Ayrshire, Edinburgh. I'm also seeing people doing this down south now as well. And in most cases, these are not just radio enthusiasts. These are people who have built businesses in other sectors who are now adding that dimension to their portfolio. And if I could just jump even further into the future with this, because I think we'll see more of this, the other thing I think that we'll see is private enterprise moving in and providing news. So there's lots of discussion around what's the future of journalism, what's the future of local news, will people ever pay for news again, where's it going to come from? I wouldn't be surprised at some point in the future if you look at the businesses around you that provide, like your local supermarket, like these Sainsbury's locals, these co-op locals that you've got in towns and villages all over the place. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point businesses like them think, okay, there's no local journalism, the local newspaper's not what it was, or it's gone completely. Okay, we'll do it. And this is pure speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised. You've got these local democracy reporters, and a lot of them at the moment are actually employed by a local newspaper, or they're employed by the BBC. It's funded by the UK government, but they're employed by and they work for the media outlet. I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if the next version of these local democracy reporters and local journalists, I wouldn't be surprised if they're employed by a local supermarket not too far from now. I think there might be a future of news and local journalism in private enterprise, whether it's supermarkets or pubs or football clubs. I think that's what we'll start to see. Who knows? But it's really interesting, businesses and this idea of contributing to the common good, doing something for society. And I think creating radio stations and producing news, and clearly there's a risk there of conflict of interest, isn't there? But I think some of them will go down that road. Again, as ever, thank you very much for listening. We don't just philosophize on the future of business or the future of journalism. We do a lot of training and consultancy. If you're new to Comsteria, have a look at our website, whether it's presentation skills training, podcast, video production, crisis comms, PR, media. Communication's our passion. So please do get in touch. Have a look at us, comsteria.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening.